Now it is time for the last word with our dear friend Ali Velshi, who's been working overtime all day and all night. Good evening, Ali.
I wish I were not working overtime on plane crashes. I have to tell you that. Philadelphia Northeast Airport is where I trained to talk to air traffic control. Because I flew out of a little airport out of Philadelphia, which didn't have a control tower. It was like a little rural airport. So you have to train to talk to air traffic control, which is really hard. It sounds normal, but they all have their own language. And that's where I trained to do this. And one of the things they train you for in flying is how to declare an emergency. There's ways to do it on the control panel. You squawk a signal 7700 to say distress. You say mayday. You say pan, pan, pan if it's not life-threatening. We're seeing air traffic control logs now, and none of that happened, which means that they did not get a warning. Air traffic control lost communications with this airplane, and there was no, at least as of now, and these things change and develop in breaking news stories, but there was no warning. So it's a sad, sad story in the air and on the ground where fires continue to burn. And thank you for your great coverage of it tonight.
Well, you too, Ali. We're lucky to have you here, my friend. Good luck. Thank you.
Have a good night, and we'll see you next week.
You too.
And we are continuing to monitor the small plane crash in Northeast Philadelphia. We'll bring you any news as we learn it. That said, 2.2 million people boarded a plane in America yesterday. And that's the day after the deadliest crash in 24 years in this country. And that's because in America, generally speaking, planes don't crash the same way twice. At least commercial planes don't. The NTSB and the FAA make sure of that. The expert investigations and the investigators at the NTSB are already collecting the evidentiary minutia that is going to allow them to write a detailed and accurate report of what happened on Wednesday night. It's going to come out very quickly, probably in the next few months. They always ask for a year, but it often doesn't take a year. And by the way, there are now NTSB investigators looking into what just happened in Philadelphia a couple of hours ago. But the reason we get on these planes after accidents, the reasons why Americans got their suitcases on Thursday morning and boarded planes in America. People were calling American Airlines and Delta and United saying, is my flight still on? Because they wanted to get on the plane to get to where they have to do, because that's how we do business in America. The reason people went to Reagan National Airport in Washington the morning after that crash is because we trust that these systems will work. The NTSB is investigating the plane crash tonight in Philadelphia so that we know what happened. And as a result of knowing what happened, changes may be made, changes to training, changes to the way airplanes operate, changes to air traffic control. That's government. All countries have governments. Americans we have been so far, lucky enough to live with the government of a confident democracy. Stuff works in safe and predictable ways. And when something happens, like what happened on Wednesday, and something doesn't work in a predictable way, we take this very seriously and we try to get to the bottom of it. That's what has historically happened. But Donald Trump's shtick is that the government is a deep state swamp. The NTSB and the FAA and American airports are the government. And the way you know government isn't what Trump pretends it is that you book the flight and you board the plane, even after a crash. And you, generally speaking, don't have to think about it.
The NTSB is an independent bipartisan board, 58 years as the gold standard. Our job is to find the facts, but more importantly, our job is to make sure this tragedy doesn't happen again, regardless of what anyone may be saying. Our investigators never want to see this happen again, and I never want to have to go back and brief another set of family like that.
It is the gold standard. The NTSB actually offers its services up to other countries when they have plane crashes or train crashes or whatever happens. They help them learn the best practices because it is the gold standard. This is what the nonpartisan administrative state provides to us, whether we realize it or not, whether you think you want it or not, whether you might think you don't like government. The federal government's got nothing to do with you. That's the federal government, the NTSB. The FAA, the airports. And that's the point. When it works, we don't have to think about it at all. That's why some people don't like government, because they don't have to think about it. That's what government in a confident democracy provides to you, the citizen, the luxury to not have to think about government. That is the compact. You get on the plane and you get on with your life. You don't even have to think about it. And it's important to say this so you understand why Donald Trump's foray to the briefing room the day after the crash was so out of the boundary of normal. Donald Trump went to the briefing room as dive crews were literally pulling bodies of victims out of the water and implied, in effect, that 67 people were dead because of diversity.
The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine?
Among the conditions he blamed, by the way, was dwarfism. Yes, dwarfism. Here is Donald Trump, the president of the United States, at the White House, railing about a fake non-problem that didn't kill anyone, but he wants you to think about that. He wants you to worry about that, to worry that somehow diversity at the FAA or the NTSB or whatever it is going to somehow harm you, rather than looking at what actually happened. A plane crashes, and Trump wants you to think that the problem is diversity and that only he can fix the problem. And today, the administration made a big show of ending pronouns and canceling Black History Month in federal agencies, whatever that means. And Trump directing attention there points attention from real questions that need to be answered this week, like these. Number one, was the control tower not fully staffed at the time of the crash in Washington, as reported by the Federal Aviation Administration in a preliminary safety report? Specifically, was the controller on duty doing a job that is normally done by two people? Number two, why did the Trump administration fire members of the Aviation Security Advisory Committee? Number three, in light of this tragedy in Washington, does the president understand that fully staffing federal agencies can, in fact, be a matter of life and death for ordinary Americans, as he plans to reverse his unilateral decision to decimate the civilian federal workforce? Number four, did Elon Musk play a role in the removal of the former FAA director who had bipartisan support? Number five, why was a replacement to lead the FAA not named until after the crash? Number six, did the federal government authorize a Black Hawk helicopter to fly in a commercial flight path at the same altitude as a commercial aircraft? Number seven, if so, will the federal government continue authorizing military helicopters to fly in commercial flight paths at the same altitude as the commercial aircraft on which you fly? Number eight, will the president, the vice president, the defense secretary, and the transportation secretary cooperate with the independent, nonpartisan NTSB investigation and correct any misinformation that they have already spread about the crash, including that it was caused by DEI and potentially dwarfism? Those are the relevant questions that were asked by the governor of Illinois. Congressman Jamie Raskin, the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, noted, quote, Donald Trump should recall that on the day of this tragic accident, the first commercial airline crash since 2009, the United States had no FAA administrator. In fact, the FAA was left rudderless for 10 days leading up to the deadly crash because apparently co-president Elon Musk aggressively demanded the ouster of the FAA chief, who previously had the temerity to hold SpaceX to account for safety violations. Trump and the first broligarch billionaire drove the FAA director out of his job on Inauguration Day. This gross mismanagement comes as Trump and Musk wage a relentless attack on federal workers, end quote. Do not hold your breath for Donald Trump to come back to the briefing room to talk about that. It seems undeniable that America under this administration took a step away from confident democracy this week. Just get on the plane and fly. It's going to be okay. The confirmation of Pete Hegseth as the defense secretary by J.D. Vance's tie-breaking vote last Friday night was the start of a parade of the most unqualified nominees ever to be steamrolled into cabinet and top-level positions. Robert Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel. In fact, if you followed these hearings like I did, let me tell you something. There was no news in those hearings. Because the news is that those candidates showed themselves to be exactly who we knew they are. Believe them when they tell you who they are the first time. Believe them when they tell you who they are a second time in Senate confirmation hearings. Given the chance to clarify things that will endanger the country, they evaded, they deflected, they denied their own words when confronted with them, with records, with recordings, with dates. Tonight, there's breaking news about large firings of career FBI agents, station chiefs, field chiefs. We're not talking about Jack Smith's prosecution team. Jack Smith and his prosecution team knew full well after the election they were all going to be out of a job. You could agree with that or not agree with but we knew that was going to happen. Current and former FBI officials tell NBC News that Trump administration officials have forced out all 6 of the FBI's most senior executives and multiple heads of various FBI field offices across the country. They include the high-profile leader of the Washington, D.C. field office. What was his offense? He was involved in the prosecutions of President Donald Trump. NBC's Ken Delanian reports that the purge also includes more than 20 special agents in charge, including in Miami and Washington, D.C. New governments come with policy shifts. We all know that. We expect that. May not be the people you voted for, but you know things are going to change. This is not a policy shift. This is a purge. And we're going to have much more on that coming up, because it's not just happening at the FBI. Here's today's breaking news from the Treasury Department, as reported by the Washington Post. The highest-ranking career official, not political appointee, career official at the Treasury Department is departing after a clash with allies of billionaire Elon Musk over access to sensitive payment systems, according to 3 people with knowledge of the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity to describe private talks. Lebrick, the person who was dismissed, had a dispute with Musk's surrogates over access to the payment system that the U.S. government uses to disperse trillions of dollars every year, the people said. The exact nature of the disagreement was not immediately clear, they said. What we do know is who that payment system services. It's run by the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. Again, an agency you don't need to know about. You just need to trust that it works. It's a sensitive systems control that controls the flow of more than $6 trillion annually to American households, American businesses, and other things nationwide. Tens, if not hundreds of millions of people across the country rely on this system, which is responsible for distributing, among other things, Social Security and Medicare benefits, salaries for federal personnel, payments to government contractors, grant recipients, tax refunds, among tens of thousands of other functions. It's been a rough week. But there was some green shoots this week. The chaos of the Office of Management and Budget memo and the instant shutdown of Medicaid portals in all 50 states. Donald Trump caved. And as the White House flailed and made excuses, Democrats assembled. Democratic attorneys general rushed to sue. 2 federal courts blocked the implementation of that freeze. Democratic lawmakers sounded the alarm about the impact to people in their states, and Trump quickly rescinded the memo. Democrats perhaps learned an important lesson very early in the Trump administration 2.0, an immediate end to health care and preschool for poor kids, plus some arts and education cuts. Elon Musk's dream, Project 2025's stated ambition? Well, apparently Trump was afraid of the kind of disruption that would cause, and Donald Trump backed down. Amid all of this, there's reporting that the all-out assault on civil servants is making them even more committed to their mission to be determined to remain at their posts. Civil servants, ready to fight, even under threat. This is important because my next guest was one of those people. This week, the Federal Reserve held its independence on interest rates. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, ignored Donald Trump's demands that he put out on Truth Social for rate cuts. I think it's easy to think, well, nothing matters when it comes to Trump. In the Wall Street Journal today, Peggy Noonan wrote that Trump has achieved 100% cultural saturation. Maybe, but he won with 49% of the vote. 4 million votes fewer than Biden won by in 2020. 50% of the country voted for someone else in November. Trump is confused. He's confusing 100% submission by Republican lawmakers as 100% submission by all of us, the rest of America. Because the most important person in America is not the American president. It is you, the American citizen. That delusion, the fact that Trump doesn't know that, is going to lead to overreach. Despite the current president, Americans think of themselves as good people. When Trump was asked if he would visit the crash site in D.C., to thank the search teams who've been working around the clock in frigid water that reeks of jet fuel to pay respects to the current burial site of dozens of victims not yet recovered, here's what he said.
Do you have a plan to go visit the site or meet with any of the
I
first
have a plan
responders?
to visit, not the site, because you tell me what's the site? The water?
Or to meet with the first responders?
You want me to go swimming? That was his response. It's day 11. We are going to see how much more America is willing to take. Joining me now is the Democratic Congressman Eugene Vindman of Virginia. He is a retired Army colonel. Not really retired because he was done with the Army, but you fought back. You were one of these people, you and your brother, fought against injustice by this guy, the same guy, Donald Trump. Cost you your career, but now you have another career. And now you are doing something for the American people. This is important. This is for senators to listen to this week, because apparently there's no career better than being a United States senator. The threat of being primaried means that you are just going to go ahead with what Donald Trump wants. Eugene Vindman, you are the one person to explain to Americans nothing is more important than your integrity.
That's true, Ali. Thank you so much for having me. Great to be back. And first thing I'd like to say is my heart goes out to the families of the passengers and crew of the American Airlines flight and the Black Hawk helicopter. And I'm also grateful to the first responders out of the 7th Congressional District, my district, local fire truck 23, who are operating fireboat 512 throughout the rescue and recovery period. They're out there in the most difficult conditions. So I spoke to the fire chief. I'm grateful for their work. They're magnificent. The second thing I would say is that, the buck stops with the president. There is no warm-up period for the president of the United States. There's no warm-up period for the cabinet. He is the president of the United States. He has a cabinet that's in place. If he wants to take responsibility for a raft of illegal executive orders, he better take responsibility for being the president and being in charge when a plane goes down in Washington, D.C. And it's as simple as that. It's on him. It's on his shoulders.
Let's talk about, I want to talk about the courage that it takes to stand up to Donald Trump. There are 3 cabinet nominees. First of all, we saw everybody fold on Pete, not everybody, all but 3 Republicans fold on Pete Hegseth. And now we're watching Kash Patel, we're watching Tulsi Gabbard, we're watching RFK Jr. And there are Republicans who have real concerns. There's a Republican senator who's a doctor who thinks RFK Jr. is just wrong about vaccines. But they're all being threatened with primaries. When you and your brother had to talk about going public about Donald Trump's phone call to Volodymyr Zelensky and withholding power, I'm pretty sure the two of you, he was in your office, he came to your office, and I'm pretty sure the two of you both knew you were going to lose your careers over this.
Look, Ali, we had a duty. We were active duty Army officers. We had a duty. We had taken an oath to the Constitution, and we performed our duty. Our jobs were not as important as our oath to the Constitution and the American people. And, when you think about the nominees that we've seen this week, is their one quality is their loyalty to the President of the United States. It's not experience. It's not judgment. It's not capability. And that's completely reversed from what it should be. These people are being hired to serve their American people, American national security interests, the safety of Americans. But the only thing that the Senate is looking for and the president's looking for, Republican members in the Senate, is loyalty. And that is a complete reversal of the way the situation should be.
But you took a position back then because you felt there was a national security issue. Congress had approved aid to Ukraine. The president does not have a right to not distribute aid that Congress has approved, which, by the way, is exactly what he did with this funding freeze this week. It's as constitutional now as it was then. And you had to you risk something by doing that. The problem we've got today is we have people who, never mind their opinions on things, they're woefully unqualified to do jobs that will risk lives. That's the danger here. This is not just a policy shift about whether or not, things you like are going to happen. In each of these positions, at the FBI, the DNI, and the Health and Human Services, lives are at risk.
That's true. It's national security and safety and the lives of Americans are at risk. And we saw what happened this week. We didn't have an FAA administrator. The president had fired the Aviation Security Advisory Committee. And when you hire or you leave holes in the federal government, when you freeze hiring, you have issues where you have insufficient staff. We've known for some time, frankly, that there are not enough air traffic controllers. When you freeze that situation, you make it even worse. And so you magnify that when you hire completely unqualified people whose only qualification is that they're loyal to you. And I hate to make potentially a sad prediction, but I think that when you try to break the federal government, you end up breaking it, and it will cost American lives and national security.
And let me ask you something about being qualified. I'm so, as I'm sure you could tell, I'm so deeply offended that in the moment where you need the president to come out here and give you the assurances that he's the head of the government does work in America, it's not yet broken. Talking about DEI and dwarfism there are experts. Let the NTSB investigate what happened. You were a government expert. That's why you were at the White House. That's why you did that. You're an expert in your field. You know things. You know that investigations take detail. You and I talked in Kyiv, where you were investigating little things that would lead to war crimes prosecutions, because experts do this. The president comes out and talks nonsense. It does not make me feel better about getting on a plane when he carries on about how it was DEI that caused an accident. Let the NTSB tell me what caused that accident.
Yeah, not only that, but he shirks his responsibility. I mean, I don't know leaders at the most junior level in the military that would shirk responsibility. I mean, if you're a leader, you lead. The buck stops with you. He's happy to take responsibility for signing, like I said, illegal executive orders, but he's happy to shift it on other people. It's nonsense. It's totally unacceptable. And, to your point, we've seen this before, right? In the first impeachment, it was this impoundment. It was the withholding of aid that the Congress had authorized. Congress has the power of the purse. I mean, it's a constitutional function. The president doesn't get to decide where he freezes aid or funds from being dispersed. And, I was out and about in my district, and I was speaking to farmers, and they're concerned about having funding from the Department of Agriculture for partially built structures or crop insurance or a backstop to bird flu, poultry insurance. There are municipalities that are concerned about not having the funding for police forces. We are not out of the woods on this funding freeze by a long shot.
We're not.
The courts stepped in, and this is going to end up breaking government. It's going to make government less efficient, and it's going to be dangerous to the American people.
You and your brother come from places where that's how it was, which is why you're here to fight for how that doesn't need to be the case in America. We have government, it works. We have a civil service, it works. We have a military that works. We need to make sure that doesn't get broken. Thank you for the work that you're doing, Congressman. Good to see you as always. Eugene Vindman, United States Congressman.
Joey.
All right, coming up, breaking news. The extent of the purge at the FBI is larger and extends to career officials now. We'll get the details next. And it comes after Trump's FBI pick says he believes the FBI reports to Trump. Breaking news. More than 20 heads of FBI field offices have been ordered to retire or be fired today, including the leaders of the Bureau's field offices in Miami and Washington, D.C. NBC News is reporting this, but beyond just DOJ leadership, Donald Trump's Justice Department started purging rank-and-file prosecutors who brought violent January 6 rioters to justice. Their termination letter quoted Trump's comments that the cases represented, quote, a grave national injustice, end quote. At least 174 of the nearly 1,600 rioters whose cases or sentences Trump terminated had been charged with assaulting police with dangerous weapons. The acting Deputy Attorney General, Emil Bovee, who served as Trump's personal criminal defense attorney, sent a memo to Justice Department leaders ordering the purge of January 6 prosecutors, revealing that the former president, Biden, gave these prosecutors permanent status following Trump's election. In his memo, Bovee called their employment subversive for federal prosecutors. The FBI Agents Association disagreed, denouncing the purge as outrageous, writing, quote, if true, these outrageous actions by acting officials are fundamentally at odds with the law enforcement objectives outlined by President Trump and his support for FBI agents. Dismissing potentially hundreds of agents would severely weaken the Bureau's ability to protect the country from national security and criminal threats, and will ultimately risk setting up the Bureau and its new leadership for failure, end quote. Now, Trump's FBI pick, Kash Patel, gave this shocking answer yesterday in his Senate confirmation hearings. He thinks the FBI ultimately reports to Trump.
Who does the director of the FBI work for, Mr. Patel?
Senator, thank you for that question. The immediate report for the director of the FBI is into the Office of the Deputy Attorney General. Then that report is taken into the Office of the Attorney General and ultimately the White House and the chain of command there.
So the FBI works for the White House?
No, the FBI is a member of the Department of Justice and has been the longstanding application.
And who does the Department of Justice work for?
They're in the executive branch, as all members do at the White House.
Attorney General Bondi gave a different answer when I asked her the same question, that they work for the Constitution and the American people.
Joining us now, David Rhodes, Senior Executive Editor of National Security at NBC News. He's also the author of the recent book, Where Tyranny Begins, the Justice Department, the FBI, and the War on Democracy. Joyce Vance also joins us. She's a former United States attorney and an MSNBC legal analyst. Welcome to both of you. David, you've been working till literally I just did that intro. You got new information on this FBI situation.
Yeah, there's a memo that was sent out by the acting director of the FBI. This is just a career person who really doesn't have much power. But essentially, the Justice Department, Emil Bovee, the acting deputy attorney general, has asked for a list of every single FBI agent in the country who worked on a January 6th prosecution. And the acting head of the FBI sent this, across the workforce, but said that he understood this would mean thousands of FBI personnel who've worked on these
because it was the largest investigation
in American history.
So these FBI agents are not self-assigning, just in the way that you and I as journalists are not self-assigning, right?
Yes.
We get assignments from other people. It's not really on an FBI agent to say, not taking that case.
And that's what's so different here and frankly surprising. This isn't some effort, to go after Jack Smith, not that, some would argue that's not justified, but this is thousands of agents who were simply doing their jobs and questioning all of the prosecutions related to January 6th, every single one of them. And so there will be a review of all of those thousands of FBI agents,
right,
and whether they too should face some sort of action as these people that were ousted tonight, the much more senior people. So it's a much broader approach than I expected. I'll be honest about that.
Joyce, let's talk about the distinction, whether it's FBI agents or it's prosecutors. Whether you agree with it or not, high-level people, sometimes get asked to resign and change over with a new administration. Some would argue, and I'm one of them, that really shouldn't happen, that the civil service is the civil service and that should be it. But sometimes political appointees get asked to move on when there's a new president. This is not what we're talking about here, Joyce. I use the word purge because it's going to ranks and levels that are much lower than the most senior decision makers, either in the Department of Justice or the FBI.
Yeah, purge is exactly the right word for what this is. You expect to see political appointees. I was a political appointee in the Obama administration. You expect to see us leave at the end of the administration. What we're talking about now is career employees, and they can only be removed, whether they're FBI agent or prosecutor, for failures in performance and conduct that are documented over a period of time with a very rigid set of protections. None of that was followed tonight. Instead, these people were essentially denigrated. Their character was attacked because they worked on cases that they were assigned to. And you know, I really resent, Allie, the suggestion that these were fly-by-night cases based on political theories, because they weren't. These were cases that were indicted after presentations to grand juries. These were trials or guilty pleas in front of federal district judges. Some of these cases were affirmed on appeal in the District of Columbia. These were, if anything, close legal issues, the sorts of cases Justice Department prosecutors have been bringing for year upon year, and you never see a conversation about career people being fired. Even when Bill Clinton was investigated and was, in fact, questioned by Justice Department prosecutors, Bill Clinton didn't try to retaliate while he was in office and order any of them fired, because that's what a banana republic dictator does. That's what Donald Trump is doing here. It is a dangerous moment, this purge that we're watching happen.
This is a big conversation, and I wish I could continue it with you tonight. We've got a lot of breaking news we have to get to, so thank you both for the news and the analysis on this, David Rode and Joyce Vance. We appreciate it. All right, coming up, we're going to get an update on the small plane crash at Northeast Philadelphia Airport, and the fire is still burning as a result of that plane crash. As you know, this evening, we're following breaking news out of Philadelphia, where a medical transport jet crashed just 3 miles away from Northeast Philadelphia Airport, PNE it's called, about 30 seconds after taking off. At least 6 people were on board, including a pediatric patient, a girl, who had apparently just completed a round of care for a life-threatening illness, according to a spokesperson for Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. Video from the crash site appears to show residential homes on fire. The jet company cannot confirm any survivors on board the aircraft at this time, but there were 4 crew, the patient and a person escorting the patient, 6 in total. Tonight, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro said this about the crash.
We know that there will be loss in this region, and we want to offer our thoughts and our serious prayers for those who are grieving at this moment. The mayor knows, and I want you all to know, that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania stands firmly with our partners in the city. We have, at the request of Commissioner Bethel, 45 state troopers who are on the ground right here in Northeast Philly. We have 25 members of our PennDOT team who are here right now. We have members of the Pennsylvania Emergency Management Authority who are here, including our director, Randy Padfield, who joins me behind here. We also have members of DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, who are here to make sure that any hazardous materials are addressed.
Joining me now is Alan Diehl. He's a former investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board. This is the second time you and I are talking this week. Totally different situation from what happened at Reagan National earlier in the week. This is a small plane. Sadly, there are more instances of small plane crashes, but I don't know if you've seen the video, Alan. That plane came right down out of the sky. That was not an attempted landing. That was a full loss of control.
Absolutely, Ali. The Learjet is a difficult plane to fly. It almost reminded me of the Jenny Rivera Lear crash, where it went straight in. It was in cruise, not right after takeoff. But this crew, obviously this flight crew, and there's always 2 pilots on these Learjets, by law. And you probably know it's a Mexican registered aircraft. I don't know how the maintenance is surveilled down there. But anyway, the jet looked like it might have been on fire before it hit, but it was obviously out of control. That 65-degree nose down angle suggests a total lack of control.
And you know, one of the things we brought up on Wednesday with the DCA crash is when a plane's going down, there are procedures that they are meant to follow. We have nothing. We have no record of communication. The tower lost communication with this plane. It is a towered airport, PNE. Lost communication with this thing. There wasn't they didn't squawk an emergency signal. There was no Mayday call. So something, and we're not going to speculate because you and I are not in the business of speculating, but something catastrophic happened here.
It had to, kind of like the situation in Washington. Everything happened very quickly on both of these tragic incidents, and there were no emergency radio calls, no attempt to take evasive action, or in this case, pull a nose up. So it was beyond control. And one of the things that the NTSB will look, well, obviously the two recorders on the Learjet that crashed will be critical because the wreckage is highly fragmented and it burns. So, yeah, Ollie, they're going to have their work cut out for them to try to figure this one out. But as usual, the black boxes are the gold standard.
Alan, kind of hoping I don't see you again this week, but thank you for being available.
Not under these circumstances.
Yeah, not under these circumstances. Thank you, my friend, for being with us again tonight. Alan Diehl is a former investigator for the National Transportation Safety Board. All right, coming up, Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing and the impact a DNI that Gabbard that she could have on America's national security. That's next.
Can't we do better than somebody who doesn't believe in 702? Can't we believe that somebody who can't answer whether Snowden was a traitor 5 times today, who made excuses for Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the first time that I'm aware of any American official has done that? I'm questioning her judgment.
And he's not the only one. Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, did not appear to help her confirmation chances during her confirmation hearing yesterday.
Was he a traitor at the time when he took America's secrets, released them in public, and then ran to China and became a Russian citizen?
Senator, I'm focused on the future and how we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Does Russia get a pass in either your mind or your heart?
Senator, I'm offended by the question.
This war and suffering could have easily been avoided if Biden administration / NATO had simply acknowledged Russia's legitimate security concerns regarding Ukraine's becoming a member of NATO. Did you say that, yes or no?
I believe you're reading my tweet, Senator.
Yes is the answer.
I believe you're reading my tweet, which is yes, unless you say your Twitter account was hacked. Joining us now, Tom Nichols, Professor Emeritus of the U.S. Naval War College and staff writer at The Atlantic. You made a comment to me, Tom, a couple weeks ago maybe, about Pete Hegseth and, worrying about some of his retrograde views about women. And your point was that we shouldn't even be at the point in the conversation where we're talking about his views about women because he's so wholly unqualified for the job. Tulsi Gabbard's the opposite of qualified. She may be less qualified for this job than Pete Hegseth was to run the Defense Department.
Yeah, that's a pretty neck and neck competition there among the various nominees that are up right now about who's least qualified for their jobs. I still think Hegseth wins simply because of the size of the Defense Department and his inability and inexperience to deal with that. But Gabbard, I mean, I think, one of the things that has been so distressing about these hearings, and you see it especially with the Gabbard hearing, are any of those Republican senators really behind closed doors? When any of them turn to each other and say, yeah, I'm a little concerned about her views, but she's totally qualified. She's an absolutely credible choice. This is another example, I think, of Donald Trump intentionally choosing people who are unqualified and controversial because he's actually not trying to reform or improve any of these organizations. He's trying to break them.
Except in the case of the Defense Department and the FBI, and particularly DNI, people could die. And the danger at DNI is that the folks who die, if CIA agents in the field die, no one ever gets to know about it. A star goes up at Langley. You will never know their names.
But all that is secondary to Donald Trump trying to break and own the pieces of these institutions. He views the intelligence community as his opponent. He views the Justice Department as an enemy. He loathes the FBI, as one of the institutions that was charged with holding him accountable for his actions. And so the idea, the Republican narrative on this is, well, Americans have questions and concerns about these institutions, and so we have to fix them, and we have to bring in kind of out-of-the-box thinking. But that's not what's going on here.
Yes.
And Gabbard, I think, is really the example of this is not intended to actually improve these institutions, intended to destroy them.
So whether it's the FBI or the Department of Defense, whatever government, I'm sure we can all, everybody in this country can agree anything can be improved. Every business leader believes that every business should be improved. That's not the debate. The debate's not partisan. The debate's not about whether we can even be more efficient about the whole thing. It's whether you're actually going to run it or break it. Tulsi Gabbard was asked basic questions about Syria and about Russia, and they're layups. And yet she couldn't answer them properly because in the past she has taken the wrong position. She has taken the position that Vladimir Putin has, that you forced us into this war. You forced us to take over Ukraine. That's BS.
Right. Kash Patel, during his hearing, at least had the presence of mind to kind of make stuff up. Well, I don't know who the people are I talked to, and of course I would never do all the things I said I was going to do. Gabbard, strangely enough, just dug in on some really damaging positions, including Snowden. When you're asked, do you think Edward Snowden's a traitor? And your answer is, well, I'm focused on the future. Then clearly your answer is, no, I don't think Edward Snowden's a traitor, or I would have said so. And I think that, again, I don't think Donald Trump or anybody in the administration really cares about that. They care that she's going to go in there and as they're hoping with other nominees, that she's going to induce chaos, paralyze these institutions, and make them subservient to Donald Trump.
Well, in the meantime, the rest of us better care about it, because it's our country and our safety that is at risk here. Tom, thanks as always. Tom Nichols. We'll be right back. And that's tonight's last word.